Rain slammed against the wide stone steps outside the glass tower, bouncing off polished marble and running in silver streams toward the street. It soaked straight through Henry Carter's borrowed navy blue suit, turning the fabric heavy and cold against the skin. The wind cut sharply, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and exhaust, but Henry didn't move. He had just walked out of the interview, rejected without ceremony, dismissed without hesitation. Rejected not because he lacked skill, rejected because he didn't fit the image. Henry tightened his grip on the briefcase, strap slung over his shoulder, the weight of it pressed down, familiar and uncomfortable, like the years he carried on his back. He turned away from the towering glass building behind him and took a step toward the street. He wouldn't beg. He wouldn't explain himself again. Dignity was the last thing he owned outright, and he wasn't about to surrender it. His shoe landed in a shallow puddle, water splashing up his pant leg. "Henry, stop." The voice sliced through the rain, sharp, commanding, unmistakable. Henry froze. Before he could turn around, the glass doors burst open behind him. A woman ran out into the storm, heels striking wet pavement, dark hair already plastered to her face. Gasps rippled through the lobby as employees and security guards stared in disbelief. Billionaire CEO Alexander Reed was sprinting into the rain, calling his name in front of everyone. Henry Carter was 36 years old, and his hands told the story of his life. They were rough and callous from scrubbing floors, scarred from years spent fixing broken fixtures and hauling equipment through hotel service corridors, cracked and swollen from 3 long years working the graveyard shift as a janitor in the very building where he had just been humiliated. But those hands had also cradled his wife as she took her final breath. They had lifted his son during asthma attacks and held him through the night, counting breaths. They had never been raised in anger, never curled into fists out of bitterness or despair. For 3 years, Henry had worked nights at Reed Towers, mopping marble floors while the city slept. Before that, he had spent 8 years in hotel services, 8 years of managing guest complaints, coordinating VIP arrivals, de-escalating emergencies, and solving problems that would have sent less experienced staff running for management. He hadn't just been good at it. He had been exceptional. His wife, Sarah, had died when their son Leo was only 3 years old. Henry didn't talk about it much. Grief was private, something you carried quietly, tucked into the spaces between breaths. On the day of her funeral, while relatives murmured condolences and passed him casseroles wrapped in foil, Henry sat in the hospital parking lot with Leo strapped into the back seat. Rain hammered against the windshield. Leo's wheezing was loud, panicked, frightening. Henry turned around in his seat, looked into his son's wide, scared eyes, and made a promise that shaped the rest of his life. "I won't let you struggle to breathe ever again," he had said softly. "Whatever it takes." That promise cost him sleep. It cost him pride. It cost him years of his life. But he intended to keep it. Henry slept 3 or 4 hours a night. His back ached constantly. His knees protested every staircase. But Leo never saw the exhaustion. Every morning, Henry made breakfast. Every evening, he checked homework. Every night, he sat beside Leo's bed, listening to the steady hiss of the nebulizer, making sure the inhaler was within reach. Henry had one thing most people lost along the way: self-respect. He would rather be poor than pathetic. He would rather struggle than surrender. Leo Carter was 8 years old, small for his age, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and a smile capable of breaking hearts. Each night, the nebulizer hummed beside his bed, filling the small room with medicated mist. Each morning, Leo woke with tight lungs and labored breaths, and still smiled at his father. "I'm fine, Dad. I promise." But Henry remembered the night 9 months earlier, when Leo woke gasping for air, lips tinged blue, fingers clawing at his throat. Henry had carried him to the car, shattered speed limits, and burst through emergency room doors on pure terror alone. They stabilized Leo within the hour. The bill arrived 2 weeks later. $2,847. Henry paid it off in $50 installments, month after month. That night carved something permanent into his chest. Not just love, desperation. The kind that pushed a man to apply for a job he had no business even dreaming about. Alexander Reed was the CEO of Reed Financial and Real Estate Holdings, one of the most powerful corporations in the country. She was 42, 6 feet tall in heels, and utterly terrifying to nearly everyone beneath her. Employees called her the Ice Queen. They called her ruthless. They called her merciless. Most of it was true. Alexandra didn't believe in small talk. She didn't believe in excuses. She believed in results, accountability, and fairness. 3 months earlier, she had initiated a company-wide audit of hiring practices after receiving an anonymous whistleblower email. It detailed patterns of discrimination. Ivy League degrees fast-tracked. Experienced candidates filtered out without interviews. Names, dates, proof. Alexandra read the email twice, jaw tightening. Then she called an emergency board meeting. "If we only hire people who look like us," she said coolly. "We're not hiring the best. We're hiring mirrors." She didn't tell them about her father, a man who worked 3 jobs and never climbed because he lacked a degree. She didn't tell them about overhearing him called uneducated by men who couldn't change a tire. Those memories stayed locked inside her. They fueled everything. The opportunity appeared at 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. Henry was mopping the executive lobby when the digital bulletin board rotated to a new posting. Front desk support associate. Daytime hours. Full benefits. Salary. $48,000 to $55,000. Henry froze. That was health insurance. That was medication without fear. That was a future. He took a photo, stared at it, told himself they'd never pick him. Then he thought of Leo. He spent 3 hours writing his cover letter. He told the truth. 8 years of hotel service. Crisis management. VIP coordination. Calm under pressure. When the application asked for education level, he paused. Then he typed, high school diploma. 3 days later, the email arrived. Interview invitation. Henry nearly dropped a spoon. "Dad," Leo asked, "are you okay?" Henry smiled through shaking hands. "Yeah, buddy, Dad got some good news." The morning of the interview, Henry borrowed a suit from a co-worker named George. It didn't fit perfectly, but it was clean. "You look like you belong," George said. Before leaving, Henry knelt in front of Leo. "If you can't breathe, you call Mr. Thompson. Promise me." "I promise." The interview went well, until the degree question. When Henry admitted he was a janitor, the room changed. The rejection came politely. Coldly, Henry walked out with his dignity intact, and nothing else. He stepped into the rain. That was when Alexandra Reed ran after him. Alexandra Reed's hand closed firmly around Henry's arm, stopping him beneath the narrow shelter of the awning. Rainwater streamed from her hair, darkening the shoulders of her silk blouse. But she didn't seem to notice or care. The world around them felt suspended. Conversations inside the lobby fell silent. Security guards stood frozen. Phones were slowly lifted, forgotten in stunned hands. The CEO of Reed Holdings stood inches from a night janitor, drenched and furious. "I watched your interview," Alexander said. Henry stiffened. He felt embarrassment rise in his chest, hot and sharp. Pity was the last thing he needed. Corporate apologies meant nothing. He opened his mouth to say so, but Alexandra didn't give him the chance. What happened in that room was wrong. Henry blinked. "I what?" "That interview," she repeated, her voice cutting cleanly through the rain, "was a disgrace." For a moment, Henry couldn't speak. His instincts told him to retreat, to protect himself from disappointment. People in power didn't do things like this. Not for people like him. Alexandra took a breath, steadying herself. 2 months ago, my business partner nearly collapsed in this lobby. Low blood sugar. Dizzy. Confused. Do you remember that? Henry searched his memory. Then it clicked. The woman in the expensive coat, swaying near the elevators. "Yes," he said slowly. "I gave her a candy bar and called security." Alexandra nodded. "She told me a man mopping floors saved her life." Henry shrugged. "Anyone would have done it." "No," Alexandra said sharply. "They didn't. You did." She explained how she'd been out of the country, how she'd never learned his name, until today, reviewing interview footage for the audit. "I recognized you immediately," she said, "and then I watched them dismiss you." Henry swallowed hard. if you're offering me the job because of that, I'm not offering charity. Alexander cut in. I'm offering justice. She called Wilfred, Melissa, and Clinton to the lobby. 5 minutes later, they emerged, confused expressions shifting when they saw Henry standing beside the Soak CEO. Explain why you rejected him, Alexander demanded. Wilfred faltered. He doesn't meet the preferred qualifications. Preferred by whom? Alexandra snapped. Performance or prejudice? She dismantled him calmly, brutally. Degrees versus competence. Image versus integrity. Then she turned to Henry. This ends the day. Her solution was fair and terrifying. A 2-month paid training program. Double Henry's current pay. Full health insurance from day one for him and Leo. No guarantees. No favors. Just a real chance. Can you prove you belong here? She asked. Henry thought of Leo, of the promise he'd made years ago. Yes, he said. Training was brutal. 6 candidates. All younger. All credentialed. None welcomed him. Whispers followed him. Favoritism. Charity case. Wilfred made things harder whenever possible. Last-minute schedule changes. Harsh grading. Subtle sabotage. Henry endured it silently. He worked harder than everyone else. Then, 3 weeks in, Leo had another asthma attack. This time, Henry had insurance. He called the nurse hotline, followed instructions, got medication within the hour. No emergency room, no crushing bill. Henry cried quietly beside his son that night, realizing the true weight of what Alexander had given him. Not opportunity. Survival. The breakthrough came in week 5. A VIP arrived early, anxious and ignored. While others panicked, Henry stepped forward. He listened. He reassured. He solved the problem. The client wrote a commendation directly to Alexander Reed. From that moment on, the tone changed. Audrey, the trainer, pulled him aside. You're the best I've seen in years. Even the whispers faded. On his first official day as a front desk associate, Henry wore a suit he had bought himself. Tailored. Earned. He stood behind the reception desk and looked out over the lobby he once cleaned at night. Wilfred passed by without a word. Alexander walked past later, met Henry's eyes, and nodded once. You earned this. The next day, Henry brought Leo to the building. This is where I work, Henry said. Leo squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you, Dad. The sky was clearing. The rain was gone. And the lesson about dignity, fairness, and refusing to surrender would stay with him forever. Because dignity isn't granted by people who think they're better than you. It's something you protect, something you earn, something you pass on.